Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about a film called Bigger, Stronger, Faster. And this video is going to be a little bit different because usually I script my reviews, so I'm like pretty coherent in the way I'm cutting stuff. But this one I kind of wanted to do more free flow just because this film was pretty important to me in that it taught me a lot about the fitness industry. And I wanted to have a more genuine conversation regarding this film and the themes behind it. This film is directed by a guy called Chris Bell. And it's a story about him and his two brothers. He's the middle brother, and he has an older brother named Mike and a younger brother named Mark. Yes, I believe those are the three brothers. So these three brothers, they grow up big wrestling fans. So through, learning about wrestling and playing wrestling as they're growing up, they get really into lifting. They get really into becoming bigger. So they're really affected by the role models they saw at the time. So there was Sylvester Stallone, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger, there was Hulk Hogan, and these are all super big, muscly men, and that really affected like how they thought like a man should look like. So they all eventually go into careers that are still related to their bodies. Like the older brother Mike becomes a professional wrestler. Chris and his younger brother Mark, they both become competitive powerlifters, and you see them, they're really big and they're incredibly strong. But Chris, the director, this is a very personal film because even though they're really passionate about fitness, he realizes that something isn't quite healthy because of all the, I guess, media factors and like what they aspire to be. His older brother and younger brother, they both take steroids. And Chris, the director, has tried them before. So this definitely becomes a very educational film regarding steroids. But it's not just about the drug. It's about the culture that America has, more specifically, that drives people to want to do this drug. And it doesn't defend the use of that kind of drug, but it kind of gives you information about why is it so stigmatized, and it offers alternative points of views of maybe like it's not as bad as you think it is, and how there is a double standard when it comes to different types of drugs. I think this topic is it's very important because a lot of people who don't think about it, it affects them in that like everybody's tried drugs. If you've done Tylenol, that's a drug. If you've had caffeine, that's a drug. Alcohol is a drug. Cigarettes are a drug. Sorry, not cigarettes. Nicotine, that's a drug too. It's just the difference between what's legal and what's illegal. And in this film, like, we learn about, steroids has a lot of beneficial uses. If you have muscular dystrophy or if you're getting weak because of some other disease, it helps you build back your muscle. So the fact that, medically it's kind of illegal in a lot of places, if not most places, it's kind of silly. It's the same thing as medical marijuana being banned in a lot of places. It just doesn't make sense if it's actually helping people. Now, where the gray area comes in is, I guess, for personal or recreational use. Me personally, like, I'm not going to advocate, pro or con against drug use, but I think as a governmental entity, they shouldn't be, imposing they shouldn't be imposing laws on what you can put into your own body. That's just my personal opinion on, freedoms as a person, right? Like, laws are definitely important, but when it comes to recreational drug use, I think, the resources are better spent elsewhere, like on rehabilitation or like other programs that help people as opposed to criminalize them. Kids nowadays do Adderall in school. Musicians take medicine that make them less nervous. Our soldiers, they take different types of drugs. Pilots need to take drugs to stay awake. In almost every single other facet of our life, drugs are basically accepted. Don't even talk about drinking and smoking, which is just perfectly legal, even though that's probably the most dangerous stuff, ever. The highest death rates come from alcohol. But yeah, when it comes to steroid use in sports, all of a sudden it's not appropriate, which I think is incredibly silly because these athletes are basically pushing the limits of the human body, regardless of what sport you're in. If you're in the best, you're competing at a level that basically humans weren't even meant to achieve. And if their livelihood and the way they feed their family depends on this, it doesn't make sense to me that they should be banned from like taking every single thing that gives them an advantage or gives them a boost, because they're already doing superhuman things. Now people will think like, okay, well, that's unfair. But after watching this film and after being in the fitness industry or researching more about it, you realize like most of these people are on something. It's a very gray area. It's very hard pressed to find, people in the top of their game that's not on anything that's slightly banned. I guess like an example would be, let's say there's two people. One person is like a genetic Hercules. Like genetically, he's super fucking gifted. He doesn't need to do anything, and he's the best. Let's just say I'm gonna pick an arbitrary sport. He's the best basketball player just based on genetics. Now you have another guy who's shorter, weaker, genetically inferior, and he works his ass off and he takes a fuck ton of drugs to like reach the same genetic potential. Would you say that, oh, it was unfair because he took so many drugs, and this guy took so many drugs, like he'd be way better? Absolutely, the genetically superior person will always be way better. But then it was never an even playing field to begin with, right? You can't say like, it's not that everybody starts off with 50 points. Everybody has different genetics. So this guy already had a huge advantage, the genetic Hercules, versus this scrawny ass mother trucker who had to work his ass off and take a lot of drugs to reach even close to the genetic Hercules. So my main point is that it's a really gray area. I think it's really unfair and judgmental to judge a person for trying to push himself to the limits. Whether or not that's in the rules, like nobody's supposed to do it, that's a separate issue. That's like a legal issue. But like morality wise, when you're trying to be the best, I think it's really judgmental to kind of knock somebody down when they're just trying to be the best. And when every fiber of your body and like your whole life is dedicated to being the best, I don't think it's such a stretch that you would try to grab every competitive advantage. I guess what was my point? My point is not that drugs are good, but it comes down to a personal choice. And there's just so much misinformation about these stuff. Like if you're growing up where I grew up, we had a DARE program, which was just like, drugs are bad, stay away from them. And that doesn't really teach you anything about drugs. And it leaves no room for people that actually need them or could benefit from them. At the very least, like even something like steroids, I think people should do their own research. Fitness is becoming super popular. There are all these like fad diets, and there's definitely a paralysis because there's just so much information. But you need to, if this is something you're remotely interested in, you should take some responsibility and try to, thread through all the bullshit and find the actual useful information, because it is out there, but it is hard to find. And when it comes to steroids, I think it was like in the film, it's the 158th leading cause of death by drugs. So it's after multivitamins, vitamin C, all the vitamins, don't even talk about acetaminophenes and all these other drugs are way more dangerous. Granted, a lot more people take those other drugs, but to see like how many people it actually affects versus the big hoopla we raise about it in the media just shows the huge disconnect between like what's actually affecting a lot of Americans and what the media and what the government choose to, I guess, focus in on. It's not a good allocation of resources to focus so much on all of this. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is also when you see all these like fitness people, all these really popular YouTubers or just people in the fitness magazines, most of these guys are not natural. And by natural, I mean they don't use any, growth hormone or any kind of steroid. There are a lot of different kinds of steroids. I would say most of these guys are definitely on something. And once again, it goes back to, their livelihood depends on it. I just work out for fun and for my health. And I have a day job. So I don't need to push myself to that kind of limit and, take on all the risks. But again, if I was feeding my daughter, my son, my wife, if I was taking care of my family and I need to look slightly better than the other guy to make a little bit more money, there doesn't seem to be any downside in taking that type of drug because it's a personal decision. Nobody will ever know, basically, unless they could access your medical records. And like, yeah, it's just you have everything to gain and almost left. You have everything to gain and almost nothing to lose. The only thing you have to lose, I guess, is your kind of dignity or honor, because because most of these guys, they don't admit they're on it. They all say they're natural. That's like kind of the cool thing. Like, oh, I'm a natural bodybuilder. You know, I did this all naturally, and you know that's just dumb. I wish this stigma wasn't there, because if they could honestly say, you know what, I'm on this, I'm on this, I'm on this, impressionable young people or even just men in general, they'll realize that, oh, like the reason I'm unable to attain this body, you know, first off, if you're working hard, you know, you have to have a good diet. That stuff all needs to be there. But, you know, this guy is taking, you know, 10 milligrams of whatever testosterone every week. So obviously he looks better. Or, you know, this person is taking some kind of growth hormone. There's actually a lot of body dysmorphia within men, because they see all these physiques and they work pretty hard, and you can't reach that. You can't be 200 pounds and 5% year round when you're like 5'7", 5'8" tall. That's just not humanly possible. That's what I'm frustrated about. I just wish there was more. I wish there could be more transparency and honesty within the fitness community and within like the fitness cover magazines. And again, I don't blame them. I don't blame any one of them, because it's hard. Like if you, right now, the stigma is still there. If you were to admit that you were on something, all of the sponsorships, all the money, the food that you put on your table, it would all get pulled. You would basically lose everything. So they can't really be honest about it. And I think that's unfortunate. And once again, once you get to the pro levels, like I'm sure they're all on something. It's not just A-Rod. It's not just, you know, he's the only person that comes to mind. But it's not just Lance Armstrong, for example. Like they're all on something. Their livelihoods depend on it. I apologize for this really long rant. I'm sure I went on some tangents, but that's just kind of what I wanted to say. This film kind of educated me on, it not just educated me, but it got me interested in what was maybe behind, you know, how I thought, because I had a stigma against it. I wanted to always get bigger and gain a lot of muscle, and I realized I was a little bit brainwashed, and I also didn't know everything that was going on. And it was frustrating, because I would see these super jacked, super ripped people, and I would wonder, like, why can't I be like that? I work out a lot, I eat pretty well, I guess. I'm still not like that. But, you know, just some more transparency and knowledge, I think, goes a long way. That's it for my super long-winded review and rant on this film. I know, once again, I know that was kind of disorganized, but, you know, let me know if that was helpful at all. And thank you so much for watching. You should definitely check out the other two documentaries that are also online, Pumping Iron and Generation Iron. They're both really good. So these three films I highly recommend if you're into fitness at all. Thank you and peace. Cinderella is an amazing and gorgeous film, and it reminded me of a type of storytelling that I didn't even realize I missed.